Hello tonight. You find yourself standing at the quiet edge of a world so old that even memory seems to move more slowly here, like a thought drifting just before sleep. You are not rushing anywhere, and nothing is asking anything of you. Instead, you are gently invited to listen, as if the land itself has been waiting to tell you a story that begins long before words existed. You begin to notice the faint glow of dawn, spreading across a vast, open horizon where two rivers stretch like silver ribbons through soft earth. This is the land between waters, a place later called Mesopotamia, though tonight it feels less like a name and more like a quiet breath. The light settles over the soil as gently as a blanket someone forgot to fold, and everything feels patient out so. Before you get completely comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you truly enjoy what we're creating here. You might also leave a comment sharing where you are in the world and what time it is for you, because somehow, even across distances, quiet stories like this bring people a little closer together. Now, slowly dim the lights, perhaps turn on a fan, letting the steady hum of the air fill the room. And in that gentle rhythm, we quietly step into tonight's journey together. You feel the air change, as if the world itself exhales, and the present moment softens into something older, something slower, something that does not mind if you drift. You walk slowly along the edge of one of the rivers, its surface moving with a calm determination that never feels rushed. This is the Tigris, though no one has written its name yet. Nearby, the Euphrates flows just as patiently, like two companions traveling together, so long that even silence between them feels full and complete. The land between these rivers stretches wide and open, its soil dark and rich, shaped by floods that return each year with quiet unpredictability. You notice how the ground feels soft beneath your feet, as if it remembers every drop of water that has touched it, a place where life grows easily, though never without gentle effort. Small villages begin to appear in the distance, their shapes low and simple. You walk closer and see narrow paths winding between these homes. It feels less like architecture and more like something gently arranged by time. As the sun rises higher, you notice the people beginning their day, moving slowly, almost rhythmically, as though guided by an invisible clock set by the sky. Some carry tools toward the fields, while others tend to animals that seem just as accustomed to the routine. It all unfolds with a quiet steadiness, like a morning playlist that no one ever bothers to skip. You watch as farmers press seeds into the damp soil, trusting the rivers to return at the right time and nourish what has been planted. Their movements carry no urgency, like waiting for a phone to charge without checking it constantly. Above them, the sky stretches endlessly, a pale blue canvas shifting in gentle shades as the day moves forward. For the people here, the sky is more than weather. It feels like a presence, quietly observed with respect, where every cloud and breeze carries a meaning not yet fully understood. At times, the wind moves across the fields with a soft whisper, brushing the tall grasses and carrying faint sounds along. You notice how people pause briefly, almost instinctively, as if listening closely. In these moments, the earliest ideas of unseen forces begin to form gently within their thoughts. Rain, when it comes, is greeted not just as water, but as something closer to a gift, perhaps even a quiet message carried from beyond. The rivers, the wind, the sky, and the rain gather meaning slowly. Like pieces of a puzzle, no one feels rushed to finish. You begin to understand that the people here are not simply surviving. They are observing, interpreting, and shaping a relationship with the world around them. In the distance, a larger settlement rises above the others, like Uruk or Yor, where people gather not only to live, but to connect, organize, and share like a calm. Instead, it rests lightly in the hands of local leaders who guide rather than control. Authority feels almost like a shared understanding, shaped by tradition and belief rather than force. There is a subtle awareness that the land itself holds the greatest influence. The rivers decide when to flood, the sky decides when to rain, and the seasons move with their own quiet authority. People adapt, adjust, and continue, learning to live within rhythms they do not fully control, but deeply respect. As the day begins to fade, the golden light softens and shadows stretch gently across the fields. The villages grow quieter, with people returning to their homes, their movements slower now, as if the day itself is winding down. It feels like the world is preparing for rest, the way a room settles just before someone turns off the lights. In the heart of one settlement, a small fire begins to glow within a simple temple, its flickering light casting long, gentle shadows that stretch and sway across the walls. You notice how people gather nearby, not in haste, but with quiet intention, as though drawn by something both familiar and softly meaningful, like returning to a place that always feels calm. The flames move softly, and for a moment, everything else seems to pause, allowing stillness to settle, like the final note of a song that lingers just long enough to be remembered. And in that quiet space, a gentle question forms, like a whisper on the evening air, asking who will speak for unseen powers and shape what quietly follows. You remain in this ancient land as morning returns once again, though something feels slightly more defined now, as if the quiet rhythms you noticed before have slowly arranged themselves into patterns. The villages are no longer just places of living. They are part of something larger, gently organized. It feels a bit like opening a well-structured app after wandering through scattered notes. The day before as you walk toward one of the larger settlements, you begin to notice a structure, rising above the rest, layered and deliberate in its design. This is a ziggurat, though no sign announces it. It stands not just as a building, but as a center, quietly shaping the life around it. Its presence feels steady, like a landmark that everyone understands without needing directions. The people here move with a sense of purpose that seems connected to this towering structure. You notice how paths naturally lead toward it, as if the entire city has been arranged with the temple at its heart. It reminds you of how modern cities often revolve around central hubs, except here, the purpose is not commerce, but something softer, more reflective. At the base of the ziggurat, figures gather in calm, deliberate motion, carrying offerings of grain, oil, or small crafted items. These are not hurried exchanges, but quiet rituals, repeated over time until they become part of daily life. It feels almost like checking notifications, except here, the messages are meant for the divine rather than a glowing screen. You begin to understand that leadership in this place does not separate the earthly from the sacred. The king, who you now see moving through the temple grounds, is not only a ruler of people, but also a representative of the gods. His authority flows from belief as much as from position, making his role feel both grounded and elevated at the same time. He does not appear distant or unreachable. Instead, he moves with a calm assurance, as though carrying a responsibility that is both heavy and familiar. You notice how people look at him not just with respect, but with a quiet trust, as if his actions help maintain the balance between the seen world and the unseen one. Within the temple, priests and attendants move in careful coordination, performing rituals that follow patterns refined over generations. There is a rhythm to their actions, a sequence that feels almost musical in its repetition. It reminds you of following a recipe you have memorized, where each step flows naturally into the next without needing to think too hard. These rituals, you sense, are not simply symbolic. They are believed to sustain the order of the world itself. When offerings are made, when prayers are spoken, it is understood that the gods respond in ways that keep the rivers flowing and the crops growing. It creates a quiet sense of stability, like trusting that tomorrow will arrive just as reliably as today. This belief forms a foundation that supports the entire society. People wake, work, and rest with the understanding that their place in this world is part of a larger design. It removes a certain kind of uncertainty, replacing it with a gentle acceptance. It feels similar to following a daily routine that brings comfort simply because it is familiar. You notice how this structure of belief helps maintain order without the need for constant enforcement. There are few visible signs of conflict, and even disagreements seem to settle into the broader rhythm of life. Authority does not need to raise its voice when it is quietly reinforced by shared faith, like background music that shapes a room without demanding attention. Yet, beneath this calmed surface, there are subtle differences between the city-states that begin to reveal themselves as you move from one to another. Each has its own ruler, its own temple, and its own interpretation of the divine. The variations are small, but they create a gentle sense of distinction. Like neighboring towns, each insisting they make the best bread, you begin to see how these differences can lead to quiet competition. It is not loud or dramatic, but it is present, like a soft tension beneath the surface. One city may build a taller temple, another may claim a closer connection to the gods. These small assertions of importance slowly shape relationships between neighboring communities. Trade flows between these cities in a steady, unhurried way, with goods moving along the rivers and across the land. You notice how items are exchanged, not just for necessity, but also for connection. It feels a bit like sending a thoughtful message rather than a quick text, carrying a sense of intention that extends beyond the transaction itself. Occasionally, these interactions shift into brief conflicts, though they rarely disrupt the overall rhythm for long. Disagreements are often settled or simply absorbed into the ongoing flow of life. It reminds you of small arguments that fade quickly, leaving behind only a faint memory that something was briefly unsettled. You also notice how deeply everything depends on the natural world. The rivers must flood at the right time, the rains must arrive as expected, and the soil must remain fertile. This dependence creates a quiet vulnerability, though it is rarely spoken aloud. It lingers gently in the background, like a thought you acknowledge, but choose not to dwell on. One of the most remarkable sights appears as you stand before the great ziggurat of war, its layered form rising step by step toward the sky. It is among the largest sacred structures of its time, shaped by both labor and belief. Its presence feels less overwhelming than grounding, like standing near something steady and quietly enduring. From this height, the city seems to breathe in rhythm, with the temple, life unfolding gently around it. As evening approaches, you notice the king ascending partway up, pausing to look across the land, then upward. It is a small moment, easily missed, yet it carries a quiet weight that lingers in that stillness. You sense that even those who hold power seek something beyond themselves, something that confirms their role and reassures their purpose. And as you stand there, watching the fading light soften the edges of the world, you begin to feel that somewhere beyond this horizon, another presence is slowly gathering, preparing to enter the story. You remain within the gentle rhythm of the southern plains, yet something subtle begins to shift, like a breeze arriving from a place you have not yet seen. The rivers still move as they always have, and the temples still rise with quiet confidence. But beyond the horizon, another current is forming. It feels like the opening of a new tab you did not click, yet somehow expected. Your attention drifts northward, where the land grows drier and the soil loses some of its softness. Here, the wind carries more dust, and the horizon stretches with a sharper clarity. Life continues, but it asks a little more effort from those who live upon it. It feels like working on a slower connection, where patience quietly becomes a necessary skill. In this northern expanse, communities gather in smaller clusters, shaped by the need to adapt rather than abundance. Water is not always close, and the land does not always respond easily. Yet there is a quiet resilience here, a steady persistence that grows stronger over time. You sense that such conditions do not rush people, but they do prepare them. Among these communities, one figure begins to take shape, not through sudden movement, but through a gradual accumulation of presence. His name, as it will later be remembered, is Sargon of Akkad. For now, he is simply part of this land, moving within it, observing its patterns, and perhaps beginning to imagine something larger. There is a story told in later years, one that drifts through time like a leaf on water. It says that Sargon was once placed in a basket and set afloat upon a river, carried gently by the current until he was found and raised. Whether this is truth or myth, it lingers in the background, like a familiar tale you half remember, but still enjoy hearing again. You sense that such stories are not merely about origins, but about meaning. To be carried by a river is to be chosen by something beyond ordinary intention. It suggests a beginning shaped by forces greater than a single life. In a way, it feels similar to how people today enjoy believing their path has a deeper purpose. Even if they still check their notifications first thing in the morning. As Sargon grows, the world around him continues to shift in quiet ways. The northern lands hold fewer resources, and communities must think carefully about how they use what they have. This creates a subtle pressure, not urgent or chaotic, but persistent. It is the kind of pressure that slowly encourages change. Like a plant bending toward light over time. You begin to notice that this pressure extends beyond individual settlements. Populations grow, needs expand, and the balance between people and resources becomes more delicate. It is not a crisis, but it is a condition that invites new ideas. Expansion, in this context, does not feel like conquest, but like a natural extension of movement. Sargon, as he is remembered, seems to understand this quiet momentum. His actions are not described here in sharp detail, but rather as a gradual alignment with the needs of his time. He gathers people, organizes them, and begins to shape a structure that reaches beyond a single city. It is a slow unfolding, like a map being drawn one careful line at a time. You sense that one of his intentions is to bring together regions that have long existed separately. The idea of unity begins to take form, not as a sudden declaration, but as a possibility that feels increasingly natural. It is a bit like realizing that several open tabs could be part of the same project, even if they were created at different moments. At the same time, the fertile lands of the South begin to hold a different kind of significance. They are not only places of stability, but also sources of nourishment that could support a broader system. Control over such regions becomes quietly desirable, not out of greed, but out of a recognition of their importance. You notice how the idea of expansion begins to intertwine with belief. Sargon is said to have claimed that his authority comes from the gods, that his path is not only practical, but also divinely supported. This does not feel unusual in this world, where the boundary between the human and the divine remains gently blurred. The claim of divine selection adds a layer of calm certainty to his actions. It provides a reason that feels larger than individual. Ambition, allowing others to accept his leadership with less resistance. It is similar to trusting a system because it appears to be endorsed by something greater, even if the details remain unseen. As you observe this quiet rise, there is no sense of urgency or disruption. Instead, it feels like watching a second. Rivers slowly approach the first, its presence growing more noticeable with each passing moment. There is no collision, no sudden change, only a gradual awareness that two flows are moving toward one another. The southern city-states continue their routines, their temples active, their rulers steady in their roles. Yet beyond their awareness, or perhaps just at the edge of it, a new form of organization is taking shape. It does not announce itself loudly, but it does not need to. Its presence is carried forward by intention and time. You begin to feel how these two regions, north and south, are part of a larger pattern that is slowly unfolding. One holds established traditions and fertile abundance, while the other carries a quiet drive shaped by necessity. Together, they create a balance that seems ready to shift, though not yet in a way that disturbs the calm. The story continues to move gently, without sharp turns or sudden movements. Sargon's rise is not a storm, but a current, steady and persistent. You sense that what is forming is not simply a change in leadership, but a new way of connecting lands, people, and beliefs into something more unified. And as you stand within this slow-moving moment, watching the northern horizon soften under the same sky that stretches over the southern plains, a quiet question begins to settle in your thoughts, as naturally as evening light settling over water. If such a power is beginning to take shape, why does this particular land call to it so strongly? You remain between the rivers as the day unfolds with its familiar calm, yet your awareness begins to deepen, as if the land itself is slowly revealing why it draws attention from beyond its quiet horizons. Nothing feels urgent, and nothing feels threatened, yet there is a gentle sense of importance here, like a place that quietly becomes the center of a story without ever asking for it. You walk again across the soft soil, noticing how it holds your footsteps with a kind of quiet generosity. This land is shaped by the steady return of the rivers, which leave behind layers of fertile silt each year. It feels like the earth is constantly renewing itself, like a notebook that never quite runs out of blank pages, no matter how often it is used. The waters of the Tigris and Euphrates move with a calm reliability, even when their timing is not entirely predictable. They do not rush, yet they sustain everything around them. You sense how their presence transforms this region into something rare, a place where life is not only possible, but quietly abundant, like having a pantry that somehow restocks itself. Overnight, as you look out across the plains, you notice how wide and open they are, stretching far beyond what the eye can easily follow. There are no towering mountains to block movement, no dense forests to slow passage. The land feels accessible, almost welcoming, like a door that is gently left open rather than firmly closed. This openness creates a subtle invitation, not just for those who live here, but for those who pass nearby. Movement across this region feels natural, almost effortless. It reminds you of walking into a well-lit room where everything is arranged just clearly enough that you know where to go without needing directions. You begin to notice paths forming across the land, some shaped by daily routines, others by longer journeys that connect distant places. These routes are not marked with signs, yet they carry a quiet significance. They link communities, allowing goods, ideas, and stories to travel with a steady ease, like messages that find their way without needing constant guidance. Over time, these paths become part of something larger, connecting Mesopotamia to regions far beyond its borders. Trade flows gently along these routes, bringing materials, tools, and knowledge from distant lands. It is not a loud exchange, but a continuous one, like a conversation that never truly ends, only pauses and resumes. You notice how this network of movement adds another layer to the land's appeal. It is not only fertile and accessible, but also connected. It sits at a kind of crossroads, where different directions meet and continue onward. It feels a bit like a central hub where multiple conversations happen at once, each adding to a shared understanding. The agricultural richness of the region supports more than just survival. Crops grow in steady cycles, providing enough not only for daily needs, but also for storage and trade. This creates a sense of security, a quiet confidence that the future can be planned rather than simply endured. It is the difference between living day to day and gently preparing for what comes next that you begin to understand that this stability allows people to think beyond immediate concerns. With food secured and routines established, attention can shift toward building, organizing, and imagining. It creates space for ideas to grow, much like how a calm environment allows creativity to emerge without pressure. Among these ideas is the development of writing, one of the most remarkable aspects of this land. In Mesopotamia, people begin to press symbols into soft clay tablets, creating what is now known as cuneiform. It is a quiet revolution, turning spoken thoughts into lasting marks, like saving a message instead of letting it fade. You imagine the first moments of this practice, when someone realizes that a mark can represent a sound, and a sequence of marks can carry meaning across time. It feels almost like discovering a way to pause a moment and revisit it later, something so ordinary now, yet profoundly new in this context. This ability to record information adds to the region's importance. Trade becomes easier to track. Agreements become clearer, and knowledge can be passed down with greater accuracy. It is as if the land itself begins to remember, holding not only crops and water, but also ideas and intentions. All of these elements come together to create a place that is not simply strong, but deeply appealing. It is not targeted because it is weak, but because it offers so much. The fertility, the accessibility, the connections, and the emerging systems of thought all contribute to a quiet magnetism that is difficult to ignore. You sense that for those beyond this region, Mesopotamia represents possibility. It is a place where effort can lead to growth, where structure can be built upon stability, and where influence can extend outward through well-established paths. It is less like conquering a space and more like stepping into a role that already holds meaning. As the day continues, you notice small groups of travelers moving steadily across the land, carrying goods, tools, and quiet stories from distant places. Some pause briefly in settlements, exchanging items and news, while others stay longer and blend into local life, like new notes joining a melody without changing its gentle rhythm. In the distance, More figures appear along the horizon, their shapes softened by the light of the setting sun. They move in small clusters, their paths gently converging with the established routes of the region. There is no sense of urgency, only a quiet continuation of motion that feels both familiar and new. As you watch these distant movements, you begin to sense that among them are the early signs of something more organized, something that carries intention beyond simple travel. It does not disrupt the calm, but it adds a new layer to it, like a second rhythm joining an already steady beat. And as the light fades and the land settles once more into its evening stillness, you feel the presence of that distant current drawing a little closer, preparing to step gently into this world, not with force, but with the quiet certainty of something that has been moving toward this moment all along. You remain within the calm landscape of the southern plains, yet something begins to shift in a way that feels almost unnoticeable at first, like a small update quietly installing in the background while everything else continues as usual. The rivers still flow, the fields still grow, and the temples still stand. But new presences begin to weave themselves gently into the existing rhythm. You notice travelers arriving more frequently now, though they do not appear hurried or disruptive. They move with a steady confidence, carrying themselves as if they belong, even in places that were once unfamiliar to them. Their presence does not replace what is already here. Instead, it settles alongside it, like a new voice joining a conversation. Without interrupting its flow, some of these newcomers begin to form quiet alliances with local leaders, exchanging not just goods, but agreements and understandings. These alliances are not announced loudly or marked by sudden change. Instead, they grow gradually, shaped by shared interests and mutual benefit, much like a collaboration that begins casually and slowly becomes something more structured. You sense that these connections extend beyond simple cooperation. They begin to influence decisions, shaping how resources are managed and how relationships are maintained between neighboring cities. It is a subtle shift where influence replaces distance, and familiarity begins to soften the boundaries that once felt more defined. As time passes, you notice individuals who carry themselves with a slightly different authority. These are officials connected to Akkad, though they do not announce themselves with grand gestures. They move through the cities with quiet purpose, observing, organizing, and gradually becoming part of the local structure, like new pieces added carefully to an already intricate design. Their presence brings small changes that blend into daily life. Systems of record keeping become more consistent, and certain practices begin to align across different settlements. It feels less like a replacement and more like a gentle synchronization, similar to how devices update overnight and feel familiar, yet slightly more connected in the morning. Within the temples, something even more subtle begins to take place. The rituals continue, the offerings are still made, and the rhythms remain steady, but the names spoken in prayer begin to shift. Alongside the familiar gods of the land, new divine figures are introduced, their presence woven carefully into existing beliefs. You notice how this blending of deities does not create conflict, but rather a quiet expansion of understanding. The gods of Akkad are not presented as replacements, but as additions, as if the divine world itself is growing to include new expressions. It feels like adding new words to a language that is already deeply known. Priests adapt with a calm openness, incorporating these new elements into their rituals without disrupting the flow of tradition. The ceremonies remain familiar, yet they carry a slightly different tone, like a melody played in a new key. It is a change that is felt more than it is seen, and it settles gently into the fabric of daily life, You begin to understand that religion plays a central role in this gradual expansion, shaping how people perceive authority across different regions. By aligning divine power within a shared framework, the people of Akkad create a sense of legitimacy that gently extends beyond borders, allowing their presence to feel natural and even expected, rather than something imposed or unfamiliar to those who experience it. This approach transforms expansion into something quieter than conquest. There are no loud declarations, no sudden disruptions, only a steady integration that respects the rhythms already in place. It feels less like taking control and more like becoming part of something that was already prepared to receive it. You notice how the local populations respond with a similar calm. There is no widespread resistance, no dramatic shift in behavior. People continue their routines, adjusting in small ways that feel almost instinctive. It is the kind of adaptation that happens when change arrives slowly enough to feel familiar. In this way, the influence of Akkad spreads not through force, but through presence. It becomes visible in the way decisions are made, in the alignment of practices, and in the shared recognition of authority that grows across the region. It is a network forming quietly, like threads being woven together into a single, continuous pattern. Historians will later recognize this period as the emergence of the Akkadian Empire, often described as the first empire in recorded history. Yet here, within this quiet moment, it does not feel like a clear beginning or a defined ending, but rather a continuation, a gentle unfolding of patterns already set in motion, moving forward with calm inevitability. You continue to walk through one of the cities, noticing how little seems to have changed on the surface. The markets remain active, the fields are still tended, and the temples continue to draw people in their daily routines. It is only in the details, in the subtle alignments, that the transformation becomes visible. There is a quiet elegance in this process, a sense that change does not always need to be loud to be meaningful. Sometimes the most lasting shifts are those that settle gently, becoming part of the background before anyone fully notices their presence. It is like adjusting the brightness of a room so slowly that no one recalls when it changed. As evening approaches, you find yourself once again near a temple, its form steady against the fading light. People gather as they always have, bringing offerings and speaking prayers that now carry both old and new names, woven together without tension. The scene feels familiar, like returning to a place that has changed gently without ever feeling unfamiliar. The flames within the temple flicker softly, casting light across faces that reflect continuity rather than disruption. The air feels calm and reassuring, as if the world has accepted this new arrangement without resistance. It is a moment both still and quietly meaningful, like a page turning so gently that you almost do not notice it happening. And as you listen closely, you begin to notice that while the temple remains the same, the words spoken within it have shifted, ever so slightly, carrying new meanings alongside old traditions. It is here, in this gentle transformation, that you sense a threshold approaching, where presence will soon become something more defined. You arrive at a moment that, in later records, will be marked with a specific date, somewhere around 2334 BCE, though here it does not feel like a turning point at all. The air moves as it always has, the rivers continue their steady flow, and the people begin their day without sensing that history has quietly adjusted its course overnight. You walk through a familiar settlement, noticing how everything appears unchanged at first glance. The same paths wind between the same homes, and the same voices drift gently through the morning air. It feels like waking up after a routine night's sleep, only to realize later that something subtle has shifted, even if nothing immediately stands out. The local rulers, who once guided their city-states with calm authority, are still present, though their roles have softened in ways that are not loudly announced. Their influence no longer stands alone, and their decisions now align with a broader structure. It is less a removal and more a quiet merging, like adjusting settings rather than turning something off. You sense that Sargon of Akkad now holds a wider authority, one that extends across multiple regions that were once independent. This control does not arrive with dramatic gestures or sudden declarations. Instead, it settles gently, as though it has been expected all along, like a plan finally becoming visible after being quietly prepared in the background. The transition feels almost ordinary, like any other day, yet with a slightly different arrangement beneath the surface. People continue their routines, unaware that the framework guiding their world has expanded. It is the kind of change that does not interrupt life, but subtly reshapes it, like an update that improves the system without altering the interface. You begin to notice small signs of this new structure as you move through the city. Messages arrive from distant regions with greater consistency, and decisions seem to follow a shared logic that connects multiple settlements. It creates a sense of alignment that was not as present before, like separate conversations slowly becoming part of a single discussion. The older forms of leadership do not disappear entirely, but they shift into new roles within the larger system. Local rulers continue to guide their communities, yet they now do so within a broader framework established by Akkad. It feels like being part of a team that has recently expanded, where individual roles remain, but the overall direction is shared. Religion continues to play a central role in shaping this transition. The authority of Sargon and his successors is presented not only as a practical arrangement, but as something supported by divine will. This belief allows the change to feel natural, even comforting, as if it aligns with a greater order that has always been present. You notice how the idea of divine selection adds a layer of quiet certainty to the new structure. If the ruler is chosen by the gods, then the expansion of authority becomes part of a larger design. It removes the need for explanation, replacing it with acceptance, like trusting a process, because it appears to follow a pattern you recognize. Within the temples, the rituals continue without interruption, yet they now include acknowledgments of this broader authority. The names spoken in prayer reflect both continuity and change, blending old traditions with new understandings. It feels like updating a familiar phrase to include new meaning while keeping its original rhythm intact. One of the most remarkable figures to emerge during this time is Enheduanna, the daughter of Sargon. She serves as a high priestess and is known for composing hymns that honor the gods, particularly the goddess Inanna. Her work is preserved in written form, making her one of the earliest named authors in human history. You imagine her within the temple, carefully shaping words that will be pressed into clay, her thoughts carried forward across generations. There is something deeply calming about this act of creation, a quiet effort to give form to belief. It feels similar to writing something meaningful late at night, knowing it might be read long after the moment has passed. Her presence also reflects how the new structure of power extends into spiritual life, connecting governance with religious expression. Through her role, the authority of Akkad is not only administered, but also articulated, given a voice that resonates within the sacred spaces of the region. It is a subtle yet powerful integration dot as you continue to move through this moment. You notice how little disruption accompanies such a significant shift. There are no sudden breaks in routine, no visible signs of resistance. Instead, life flows onward, carrying the change within it as naturally as the rivers carry water through the land. This quiet transition highlights how deeply belief shapes acceptance. When change aligns with what people understand as divine will, it does not feel imposed. It feels appropriate, even inevitable, like a season arriving at the time it is expected, bringing with it a sense of continuity rather than surprise. Not to begin to sense that this quiet moment carries a lasting impact, even if it feels gentle and unremarkable at first. The idea of a unified structure, supported by shared belief, begins to settle into the rhythm of human life, shaping how societies organize themselves in ways that feel natural, steady, and quietly enduring over time. This pattern does not remain fixed in one place or moment, but continues to reappear in different forms across history. It adapts to new environments and new people, yet its foundation remains familiar, like a story retold across generations, where the details change, but the deeper meaning continues to echo with a calm and recognizable presence. As the day moves toward evening, you watch a scribe pressing a seal into soft clay, marking a document with quiet authority. The motion is slow and deliberate, leaving an impression that confirms the new order. It feels like a small act. It carries a gentle finality, like saving something that will not be undone. The clay holds the mark, just as the land now holds this new arrangement of power. Nothing feels dramatic, yet everything has shifted. And as you watch the seal set into place, you begin to feel that the story is moving forward once again, not through change itself, but through how people quietly begin to live within it. You remain within the quiet rhythm of the land as the new structure settles into place, yet life does not pause or resist. The fields stretch toward the horizon, and the rivers move steadily on. It feels as if the sky has shifted slightly, while the ground beneath you stays familiar and calm. You walk along a narrow path between fields where farmers continue their work with steady focus. Their movements are unhurried, shaped by the same seasonal patterns as before. There is no disruption, only a gentle continuation, as though life itself prefers consistency over sudden change, quietly maintaining balance through simple, familiar routines. You begin to notice that the people here do not respond to the new authority with resistance or unrest. Instead, they adapt gradually, almost instinctively, adjusting to subtle changes as they arise. It feels similar to getting used to a new interface, where at first everything seems unfamiliar, but soon becomes second nature without requiring much effort or attention. Markets continue to operate with a calm, steady flow, with goods exchanged, and conversations carried on as they always have been. Traders move between settlements, bringing items from distant regions, their journeys now shaped by a slightly more connected system. It feels like the same network, only now with fewer interruptions, allowing movement to feel smoother and more predictable. As you listen closely to the voices around you, you begin to notice small shifts in language. Akkadian words appear alongside older expressions, blending naturally into daily speech. The change is not abrupt, but gradual, like adding new phrases to your vocabulary, until they begin to feel just as familiar as the ones you have always known. This blending of language reflects a deeper integration, one that extends beyond communication into shared understanding. People begin to think in ways that align more closely with the broader structure, not because they are told to, but because it becomes easier over time. It is the kind of change that happens quietly, like adjusting your habits without consciously deciding to do so. In the temples, Rituals continue to unfold with the same calm precision, yet you sense a subtle evolution in their form. The names of gods, the sequence of prayers, and the gestures of devotion carry slight variations that reflect the influence of Akkad. It feels like a familiar melody, played with a few new notes, still recognizable, yet gently transformed. Priests move with quiet confidence, guiding these changes without creating disruption. They incorporate new elements into existing practices, ensuring that the continuity of belief remains intact. This careful balance allows the transition to feel seamless, as though the old and the new have always been part of the same story. You recall the presence of Enheduanna, whose hymns continue to echo through these sacred spaces. Her words, dedicated to the goddess Inanna, carry a depth that resonates across regions, linking communities through shared devotion. It is remarkable to consider that her voice, shaped in this distant time, still reaches forward like a message. Preserved carefully for the future. Her work represents more than personal expression. It reflects the merging of political authority and spiritual life. Through her hymns, the divine and the administrative become intertwined, creating a sense of unity that supports the broader structure. It feels like writing that does more than communicate, quietly shaping how people understand the world around them. As you move through different settlements, you notice small groups of people traveling from one place to another, carrying with them tools, goods, and knowledge. These movements are not large or dramatic, but they contribute to a gradual mixing of communities. It feels like threads being woven together, creating a fabric that becomes stronger with each connection. These migrations are often subtle, driven by opportunity rather than necessity. Some seek new land to cultivate, while others follow trade, routes that have become more reliable under the new system. The movement feels natural, like following a path that becomes clearer the more it is walked. Despite these changes, daily life retains its familiar structure. People rise with the sun, work the land, tend to animals, and gather in the evening with a quiet sense of completion. The rhythm of existence remains steady, providing a sense of comfort that anchors everything else. It is a reminder that even as structures shift, life itself continues in its own gentle way. You begin to understand that adaptation does not always require effort or resistance. Sometimes it unfolds as a series of small adjustments that gradually become part of the whole. It is the kind of change that is felt more in hindsight than in the moment, like realizing you have grown accustomed to something without remembering when it began. The presence of Akkad is now woven into the fabric of this region, visible in language, ritual, and organization, yet not overwhelming. It exists as a layer rather than a replacement, allowing the past to remain while gently guiding the future. It feels like adding a new layer of meaning to something already understood. As the day moves toward evening, you watch familiar patterns unfold once more, though they carry a slightly different tone. The fields are tended with steady care, the markets grow quiet, and the temples glow softly in the fading light. Everything feels both unchanged and gently new, like a scene you have seen before, now viewed from another angle. The air holds a calm acceptance, as if life has adjusted without ever losing its quiet balance. People continue their routines with soft confidence, moving through the day without hesitation. Their actions feel grounded and steady, guided by rhythms that remain reliable even as the world around them has shifted in subtle and almost unnoticeable ways. There is something reassuring in this continuity, a sense that tomorrow will arrive just as gently as today has passed. The land, the people, and their shared routines create a quiet harmony that persists through change. It feels like a promise that does not need to be spoken, only lived, carried forward in the soft rhythm of passing days. And as the light fades, and the sky deepens into evening, you begin to sense that this period of adaptation is settling into something more stable, something that will soon feel fully established. The quiet changes have taken root, and from them, a new order begins to emerge, ready to carry the story forward once again. You begin to feel a quiet sense of structure settling over the land, like a soft pattern gently laid across everything you have seen before. The changes that once seemed subtle now form something more recognizable, though still calm and unhurried. It feels like opening a well-organized notebook after pages of scattered thoughts, where everything now has its place, without losing its natural flow. As you move through the cities, you notice that authority now stretches outward from a central point, connecting regions that once stood apart. This is the system shaped by Akkad, where governance is no longer isolated within each city, but coordinated across a wider landscape. It feels less like control and more like alignment, as though different parts of a melody are finally playing in harmony. Officials appointed by the central authority move through these regions with quiet purpose, carrying responsibilities that link local life to a broader system. They do not disrupt the daily rhythm, but they guide it gently, ensuring that decisions made in one place resonate with others. It is a kind of organization that feels steady, like a schedule that quietly keeps everything on track. You notice how these officials interact with local leaders, not replacing them entirely, but working alongside them. This layered approach allows continuity to remain while extending the reach of central authority. It is similar to adding a new layer to an existing structure, where both the old and the new continue to support each other without conflict. Within this system, administration becomes more consistent, and processes begin to follow shared patterns. Decisions about resources, labor, and trade are recorded and communicated with greater clarity. It creates a sense of order that feels reliable, like knowing that each step in a process will lead smoothly to the next without unexpected interruptions. Writing plays an essential role in maintaining this structure. Clay tablets are used to record transactions, agreements, and responsibilities, turning everyday actions into lasting records. You imagine the careful pressure of a stylus against soft clay, leaving marks that preserve information long after the moment has passed. Like saving a document you know you will need again. Some of these tablets, preserved through time, still exist today, offering glimpses into how taxes and resources were managed in this early system. They reveal a world where organization was not only imagined, but practiced with care. It feels almost comforting to know that even in such distant times, people valued keeping track of things. You begin to notice how taxation becomes part of this structured life, though it does not feel burdensome or harsh. Instead, it is integrated into the rhythm of the community, contributing to shared stability. It is less like a demand and more like a contribution, supporting a larger system that now connects multiple regions together. Religion continues to play a central role in shaping and supporting this order. The gods are not only worshipped, but also organized in ways that reflect the structure of the empire. Their roles become more clearly defined, their relationships more systematically understood, creating a divine framework that mirrors the human one. This organization of the divine does not feel rigid, but rather clarifying. It allows people across different regions to share a common understanding of the gods, even as local traditions remain. It is like having a shared language that still allows for regional accents, creating unity without erasing individuality. You sense that this alignment between governance and belief strengthens the stability of the system. When authority is seen as part of a larger, divinely supported order, it becomes easier to accept and maintain. It removes uncertainty, replacing it with a quiet confidence that everything is unfolding as it should. Despite this increased level of organization, the presence of control remains gentle. There are no sharp edges or visible force, only a steady guidance that shapes daily life. It feels like a current beneath the surface, directing movement without drawing attention to itself, allowing people to continue their routines without disruption. Markets, fields, and homes continue to function as they always have, now supported by a system that ensures greater consistency. Trade flows more smoothly, resources are managed more effectively, and communication between regions becomes more reliable. It is a subtle improvement, like refining something that was already working well. You begin to understand this stability is not static, but dynamic, maintained through continuous adjustment and care. The system adapts as needed, responding to the needs of different regions while maintaining its overall structure. It is a balance that requires attention, yet it operates with a calm steadiness as the day moves forward. You find yourself observing a group of scribes seated together, their focus directed toward the clay tablets before them. Their movements are precise and deliberate, each mark placed with intention. There is a quiet concentration in their work, as though they are capturing not just information, but the rhythm of the world around them, the sound of stylus against. Clay is soft and repetitive, forming a gentle rhythm that blends into the surrounding stillness. It carries a quiet consistency, like a slow heartbeat within the room, steady and unhurried. You find it calming, as though the simple act of writing allows the mind to rest while something meaningful quietly begins to take shape. There is something almost meditative in their movements, each mark pressed with care and intention. The scribes do not rush, nor do they pause unnecessarily, but continue with a steady focus that feels deeply grounded. You begin to notice how their work connects the present moment to something that will last far beyond it, preserved with quiet patience in this still scene. You sense how the structure of Akkad has settled into a stable and balanced form. It is supported by systems that bring together authority, belief, and daily life without strain. Nothing feels overwhelming, only gently organized, offering a quiet continuity that allows everything else to unfold naturally, like a rhythm that sustains itself. And as you watch the scribes continue their work in silence, their tablets gradually filling with careful marks, you begin to feel that these quiet records will carry the story forward through time. They preserve traces of this moment, long after it fades, like messages left behind for the future, gently holding memory in place. As everything else moves on, you continue moving through this now unified landscape, and over time, the changes that once felt subtle begin to leave clearer traces, like footprints that remain long after the traveler has passed. The land itself feels familiar, yet gently, reshaped as if a quiet hand has redrawn its outlines. It is not a dramatic transformation, but more like rearranging a room so slowly that you only notice it later. You begin to sense how new boundaries have formed, not always visible on the ground, but present in how people understand their place within a larger whole. These borders are less about separation and more about connection, defining a shared space that stretches across regions. It feels like moving from individual notes to a complete piece of music, where each part contributes to the whole. Trade continues to flow across this expanded landscape, though now with a greater sense of cohesion. Goods travel more efficiently between regions, supported by the structures that have been quietly established. You notice how marketplaces feel slightly more connected, as if they are part of a larger network rather than isolated points, like different branches of the same store sharing the same system. This growth in trade brings with it a gentle increase in prosperity, allowing communities to access resources that were once distant or difficult to obtain. The exchange of goods becomes smoother, and with it comes the exchange of ideas. It is a quiet enrichment where daily life feels just a little more supported, like having everything you need within reach without searching too hard. As you observe the people around you, you notice how cultural elements begin to blend in ways that feel natural rather than forced. The traditions of Sumer and Akkad intertwine, creating a shared way of life that carries aspects of both. It feels like two melodies gradually harmonizing, each retaining its character while contributing to something new. Language continues to reflect this blending, with Akkadian becoming more widely used, while older expressions remain woven into conversation. The result is a form of communication that feels layered, carrying both history and adaptation within it. It is similar to how certain phrases linger over time, even as new ones quietly take their place in the temples. This blending becomes even more visible, though still calm and balanced. The gods of Sumer are not removed, but they are gradually aligned with those of Akkad, their identities shifting slightly to fit within a broader system. It is a process that feels less like replacement and more like translation, where meaning is preserved while form evolves. You notice how some deities are given new names or merged with others, creating a unified pantheon that reflects the structure of the empire. This transformation does not disrupt belief, but rather expands it, allowing people to see familiar divine figures within a new framework. It feels like recognizing the same story told in a slightly different way. This alignment of the divine mirrors the organization of the human world, reinforcing the sense that everything is part of a larger, connected system. The boundaries between regions soften, and the distinctions between traditions become less pronounced. It creates a quiet sense of unity, where differences are acknowledged but no longer separate. As you walk through one of the cities, you notice how architecture also reflects this blending. Buildings carry familiar forms, yet subtle variations appear in their design, influenced by different traditions. It is as if the city itself is learning to speak in a new accent, one that carries traces of its past while adapting to its present. You begin to understand that these changes, though gentle, are lasting. They shape how people live, think, and relate to one another, creating a shared identity that extends beyond individual communities. It is not something that is declared, but something that emerges naturally, like a habit formed over time without conscious effort. Among the most enduring traces of this period are the clay tablets that record daily life, trade, and belief. These small, carefully inscribed objects hold information that outlasts the people who created them. You imagine them resting quietly for thousands of years, waiting patiently to be rediscovered, like messages left in a time capsule. Some of these tablets reveal details about economic exchanges, while others preserve hymns, stories, and administrative records. Together, they form a quiet archive of this world, offering glimpses into how people lived and thought. It is a reminder that even the smallest marks can carry meaning across vast stretches of time. You pause to consider how remarkable it is that these records survive while so much else fades. The clay, once soft and impressionable, becomes firm and lasting, preserving moments that would otherwise be lost. It feels a bit like saving a file in a format that remains readable long after the device itself is gone down. As the day moves toward evening, you find yourself standing at the edge of a city that feels both familiar and slightly unfamiliar at the same time. The streets, the buildings, and the rhythms of life carry echoes of what once was, yet they are shaped by the changes that have taken place. There is a quiet beauty in this balance between past and present, where nothing is entirely replaced, and nothing remains exactly the same. It creates a sense of continuity that feels comforting, like revisiting a place you once knew, and finding it gently transformed rather than entirely different. You notice how people move through this space, with ease, their actions reflecting a world that has settled into its new form. They do not seem burdened by the changes, but rather supported by them, as if the adjustments have created a more stable foundation for daily life. The city itself feels like a living record, carrying layers of history within its walls and pathways. Each step you take seems to echo with the presence of those who came before, their lives quietly embedded in the structure of the place. It is a reminder that history is not only remembered, but also lived. And as you stand there, watching the last light fade across a city that feels both known and newly shaped, you begin to sense that even this stability holds the seeds of change. That beneath the calm surface, something subtle is beginning to shift once again, preparing the story for its next quiet turn. You remain within the calm structure that has held this land together, yet something begins to soften at its edges, almost too gently to notice at first. The systems are still in place, the records still kept, and the temples still active, but the feeling beneath it all begins to shift. It is like a quiet signal weakening, not suddenly lost, but gradually fading. The rivers still flow, though their patterns seem slightly less predictable than before. There are seasons when the floods do not arrive as expected, and the soil feels just a little less generous. It is not a dramatic change, but it lingers in the background, like weather that feels off without being easy to explain. You notice how these subtle, environmental changes begin to affect daily life in small ways. Crops require more attention, and outcomes feel less certain than they once did. The rhythm of agriculture, once steady and reassuring, now carries a faint unpredictability, like a routine that no longer unfolds exactly as planned. Beyond cultivated fields, movement begins to increase along the outer edges of the empire. Groups from neighboring regions, shaped by their own pressures, drift closer to the borders. Their presence is not immediately disruptive, but it adds a new layer of complexity. Like additional voices entering a conversation, it was once more contained. These groups do not always arrive with clear intention, and their interactions vary. From trade to quiet tension, you sense that the boundaries of the empire, once gently defined, are becoming more porous. It feels less like a solid structure, and more like something gradually loosening, allowing movement in ways that were once more controlled. Within the cities, authority remains present, yet its reach feels slightly less firm. Decisions still come from central leadership, but their influence does not travel as smoothly across the land. It is a subtle shift, where communication feels just a bit delayed, like messages that take longer to load than they once did. Local leaders begin to rely more on their own judgment, filling in gaps where central guidance feels distant. This does not create immediate conflict, but it introduces variation into a system that once valued consistency. It is like a shared document where different people begin editing at the same time without full coordination. Religion continues to provide a sense of structure and reassurance, with rituals carried out as they always have been. The temples remain places of gathering and reflection, offering continuity in a changing environment. It is a steady presence, like returning to a familiar space when everything else feels slightly uncertain. Yet within these rituals, you begin to sense a subtle shift in belief. The confidence that once accompanied divine order feels just a little less certain, not replaced, but softened. It is as if the connection between the divine and the everyday world has grown quieter, requiring more faith to maintain. People still pray, still offer, still follow the patterns that have guided them for generations. But there is a gentle questioning. Beneath the surface, not spoken aloud, but present nonetheless. It feels like continuing a habit while quietly wondering if it still holds the same meaning it once did. You begin to understand that belief, like structure, can change gradually. It does not disappear suddenly, but evolves, responding to the experiences of those who hold it. This transformation is slow and often unnoticed, like a background process that continues without drawing attention to itself. As these changes accumulate, the once unified structure of Akkad begins to loosen. The connections between regions remain, but they are no longer as tightly held. It is not a collapse in the dramatic sense, but a gradual unraveling, like threads separating one by one from a woven fabric. Historical records will later describe this period as the gradual decline of the Akkadian Empire, leading to its fall. Around 2154 BCE, scholars will piece together fragments of evidence, tracing shifts in climate, movement, and governance. Yet here, within this living moment, none of that feels immediate or dramatic, only a quiet change unfolding without clear boundaries. Standing within this time, you do not sense an ending, but rather a gentle transition taking place beneath the surface of daily life. One form of order slowly loosens its hold, making space for something not yet fully shaped. It feels like watching light fade into dusk, where the next phase arrives softly, without needing to be announced. The cities continue to function, the people continue their lives, and the land remains as it always has been. The change is not in what is seen, but in how things connect. It is a shift in structure rather than substance, like rearranging the framework that holds everything together. You walk once more through a familiar settlement, noticing how the routines remain intact, even as the larger system begins to fade. The market's still open, the fields are still tended, and the temples still welcome those who seek comfort. Life continues, steady and calm, even as the structure around it changes. As evening approaches, the light softens once again, stretching long shadows gently across the land. The sounds of the day begin to fade, and a familiar stillness slowly returns, settling into every corner with quiet ease. It feels like the closing of a chapter, though not with finality, but with a soft sense of continuation that carries forward. Without urgency, you find yourself watching a small flame flicker within a temple, its glow steady yet delicate as it moves softly with the air. The light shifts gently, never still, yet never fully fading. It draws your attention in a calm, almost reflective way, like watching something simple that quietly holds more meaning than it first appears. It reminds you of the empire itself, once strong and bright, now gradually dimming without any sudden disappearance. There is no abrupt ending, only a slow softening of presence. The flame does not go out, and neither does the memory it represents. It simply becomes less certain, like something gently fading into the background of time. And in that quiet dimming, you begin to sense that this is not an end, but part of a larger rhythm, where power rises, settles, and gently fades, making space for something new to emerge, continuing the endless flow of time that carries all things forward. You remain in the quiet after the fading of structure, where the land feels familiar once more, yet gently emptied of the patterns that once defined it. Nothing has disappeared entirely, yet everything has softened. It is like closing a book, and still feeling the story linger in your thoughts, not with urgency, but with a calm presence that stays with you. You begin to trace the path that has unfolded, from the early villages resting between the rivers to the rise of organized city-states, and then into the quiet expansion of something larger. Each step felt natural at the time, never rushed, never forced. It is a reminder that even great transformations often arrive gently, like a tide that moves without asking to be noticed. The small city-states once stood as separate centers of life, each guided by its own rhythms and beliefs. They were complete in themselves, yet open to change. Over time, those individual patterns were gathered into something broader, shaped by shared structure and supported by a common understanding of the divine. That larger structure, the Empire of Akkad, did not replace what came before, but wove it together, creating a system that extended across the land. It was held in place not only by organization, but by belief, by the quiet trust that authority was connected to something greater than human intention alone. You begin to sense how religion, in this world, was never only about devotion or ritual. It was a way of understanding power, of explaining why certain structures existed and why they felt meaningful. It provided a language through which people could accept and participate in the systems that shaped their lives. This connection between belief and authority created stability, allowing large systems to function without constant force. When power is seen as part of a divine order, it becomes easier to live within it. It feels less like being controlled and more like being part of something that has always been, something that simply continues. Yet, as you have seen, even the most stable structures do not remain unchanged forever. The empire that once unified the land gradually softens, its connections loosening with time. It does not end in a single moment, but fades gently, like a sound growing quieter until it is no longer heard, leaving only a faint memory behind. You begin to realize that this pattern is not unique to this place or moment in time. It belongs to a larger cycle that quietly repeats across history, where power rises, settles into form, and is eventually reshaped or replaced. It feels natural, almost like the steady rhythm of seasons that move forward without ever truly stopping. Within this cycle, religion continues to play its quiet and enduring role, adapting alongside the structures it helps support. It shifts gently, responding to the needs and understandings of each new generation, offering meaning where change might otherwise feel uncertain. It remains present, even as everything around it slowly evolves over time. It is not something fixed or rigid, but something flexible and living, like a story told again and again in different ways. Each version carries new details, yet the deeper meaning remains familiar. In this way, belief continues to guide, not by resisting change, but by moving softly with it. Like a current beneath the surface. You begin to see how these cycles are not something to resist, but something to observe with quiet curiosity. They remind you that change does not always mean loss, and that endings often carry the beginnings of something new. It is a gentle perspective, one that allows you to rest within the flow rather than push against it. As you stand once more between the rivers, you notice that they continue to move as they always have, unaffected by the rise or fall of human structures. Their waters reflect the sky, carrying light and shadow in equal measure. It feels as though they remember everything, yet hold on to nothing. The wind moves softly across the plains, brushing against the remnants of walls and pathways that once held meaning for those who lived here. These traces remain, quiet and patient, like echoes that do not demand attention. They are part of the landscape now, woven into its ongoing story. You notice how the land itself does not distinguish between past and present. It simply continues, offering the same soil, the same water, and the same sky to whoever arrives next. It is a steady presence, one that invites life to begin again without needing to erase what came before. There is something deeply calming in this continuity, in the understanding that nothing truly stands alone. Every structure, every belief, and every moment is part of a larger flow that carries everything forward. It is a perspective that softens the edges of change, making it feel less like an ending and more like a transition. You begin to feel the seal. Quiet stillness settling in once more, like the closing moments of a long, gentle day. The details of the story fade into a soft awareness, leaving behind a sense of connection rather than conclusion. It is the kind of feeling that does not need to be held tightly to remain present. As your awareness drifts, you sense that somewhere, beyond this moment, beyond this land, other stories are beginning to take shape. Other communities are forming, other beliefs are emerging, and other structures are quietly rising. The pattern continues, steady and unbroken, like a path that extends beyond what can be seen. And as people rest, as night settles gently across the earth, time continues to move with its calm, unhurried rhythm. It does not pause, and it does not rush. It simply flows, carrying everything with it, whether noticed or not. Like a quiet current beneath the surface of thought, you allow yourself to settle into that rhythm, letting the story dissolve into the gentle movement of time itself. There is nothing more to follow, nothing more to understand, only the quiet presence of a world that continues without needing explanation, holding you softly within its endless flow. Somewhere, far beyond this place, a new beginning is already unfolding, just as this one once did, carried forward by the same quiet forces that shape all things. And here, between the rivers, the night deepens, the wind softens, and the story gently comes to rest. The script comes to a close. Thank you all for listening.